Now on Overnights,
I believe in reason and common sense.
Leith Van Onselen from Macro Business with the Treasury of Common Sense.
Common sense never goes out of style.
Morning, Leith. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks, Phil. How about yourself?
I'm okay. So your topic is, will Sydney-siders and Brisbaneites flee south to Mexico? You're kidding. Everybody's going to be eating tacos all of a sudden.
Yeah, well, I mean, not so much tacos, probably drinking small, pretentious coffees, more like it.
Okay.
Which is kind of the way down here in Melbourne. But, yeah, the reason why I approached this, it's based on some sort of interesting data that we received in the last week. So just to go back a bit, over the COVID-19 pandemic and the years immediately following, there was a really strong migration north from Victoria to Queensland. And whereas there's always been a strong migration flow from Sydney to Queensland, that's been pretty much happening for decades. So, there was various reasons for that. Obviously, Victoria had, huge lockdowns during the pandemic, and it hasn't been a particularly great economy down here. So literally thousands of people shifted from Victoria up to Queensland, particularly to Brisbane. And obviously, as I just said, Sydney-siders have been going north to Brisbane and Queensland for years. But according to the most recent Australian Bureau of Statistics population figures, Victoria actually experienced 2 consecutive quarters of net inward migration from other states. And this was the first inflows since the pandemic began. And at the same time, Queensland's interstate migration inflows fell to its lowest level since 2016. And New South Wales basically experienced its usual historic outflow. So there wasn't really much change there. But there was a notable change. So, people are now starting to flow back into Victoria. The inflow into Queensland has reduced. And I'd argue that this shift in migration rates, it makes sense when you examine the disparities in housing values between Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. So according to PropTrack, which is a data analysis firm, does property data, that sort of thing, Brisbane home values, they've surged by 116% at the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020, whereas Sydney's have risen by 46%. So not nearly as strong as Brisbane, but still, pretty decent growth. In comparison, Melbourne home values have only risen by 22% over that same period. Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, back in March 2020, Sydney had the most expensive housing market in the nation. This was followed by Melbourne. So at the start of the pandemic, it was Sydney, then Melbourne. And way down the list was Brisbane. So Brisbane had really cheap housing at the start of the pandemic. But now, because of this explosive price growth in Brisbane, 116% since the beginning of the pandemic, the affordability picture has completely changed. So Sydney is still the most expensive housing market in the nation, but Brisbane has caught up and it's nipping at its heels. And Brisbane is now the second most expensive housing market in the nation. And now Melbourne has gone from being the second most expensive at the start of the pandemic to becoming the cheapest major capital city housing market. So now Melbourne looks like the bargain of the century. So the median dwelling value in Melbourne is unbelievably $401,000 cheaper, which is 47% cheaper than Sydney's. And it's also $192,000 cheaper Brisbane. That's 22% cheaper. And the latest house price forecast from KPMG suggests that Brisbane's going to continue to experience strong house price growth over the next 2 years. So that's this year and next year. Whereas Melbourne and Sydney are going to experience softer growth. So Melbourne's going to be basically trailing the pack again. My question here is, given Melbourne's far superior housing affordability now, again, it's gone from being the second most expensive housing market in the nation at the start of 2020 to being the cheapest, and Brisbane's gone from being one of the cheapest in the country to the second most expensive, and Sydney is still expensive. It always has been. It's still the most expensive. Are we likely to start seeing significant numbers of Brisbaneites or Queenslanders or New South Welshmen now fleeing south to Mexico down here to Melbourne in search of affordable housing? Nearly about 6 years ago, affordable housing was a key draw card for Brisbane. It was the main draw card. That was basically pulling people north from Melbourne, not just to escape the lockdowns, but also because you could effectively buy a good-sized house for a bargain basement price. And also for Sydney-siders, because obviously Sydney's housing market is incredibly expensive. The median house price in Sydney is $1.6 million. So, Sydney-siders were fleeing north as well to Brisbane because it was so cheap. But now that affordability picture has completely reversed. And now Brisbane's expensive, Sydney's still expensive, but now Melbourne's dirt cheap. So Melbourne's median house price is exactly bang on about $1 million. To Sydney's, that's over 1.6 million, and Brisbane, that's over 1.2 million if you want a detached house. So here's the question. Surely Melbourne is now going to start pulling people south from Sydney and Brisbane? That's the question here. And I'm interested to hear listeners' feedback.
Yeah, we'll open up that one on the phone as well. It's a great article, mate. Where can people find the details on this one, Leith?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I can find it at macrobusiness.com.au.